When you hear Vietnam War, what images flood your mind? Dense jungles, the whir of Huey helicopters, stealthy guerrilla fighters, booby traps, and underground tunnels. But there's a far more dangerous story, one that rarely gets told. A story of courage and terror, thousands of feet above the ground, of American fighter jet crews flying into some of the most lethal air defenses ever created, of missions so deadly many pilots never expected to return. Today, we'll pull back the curtain on one of the most dangerous jobs of the war, where survival wasn't guaranteed, and being shot down often led to horrors even worse than death. Before we dive in, did you know that most people watching this aren't subscribed? We're on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers. So if you want more powerful stories like this, hit that subscribe button now and help us get there. Now, let's begin. As the Vietnam War escalated in the early 1960s, U.S. military planners knew one thing: controlling the skies would be key to success on the ground. Fighter jets quickly became the backbone of American strategy. Their mission? Strike deep into North Vietnam, crippling supply lines, destroying key infrastructure, and wearing down the enemy's ability to wage war. Jets also provided critical support for ground troops in South Vietnam, keeping enemy forces pinned down and preventing surprise attacks. At this stage, American air power seemed unstoppable. The U.S. fielded some of the most advanced jets in the world, faster, higher flying, and more powerful than anything North Vietnam could put in the air. Early missions often ran smoothly. Jets would fly in, unleash their payloads, and return with minimal risk. American air crews believed they had the upper hand. But that confidence wouldn't last. Behind the scenes, a deadly shift was coming, one that would turn these skies into a death trap for even the most skilled pilots. At first, American jets dominated the skies over Vietnam, but everything changed when North Vietnam's allies, the Soviet Union and China, began pouring in advanced weaponry. Suddenly, U.S. pilots faced a deadly new reality: radar-guided missiles, sophisticated anti-aircraft artillery, and fast, maneuverable enemy jets. These weren't scattered defenses. They were part of a carefully designed, overlapping system. Each layer protected the others, creating what many called the most intense air defense network in history. Missions that once felt routine became high-stakes gambles. Pilots couldn't rely on speed and altitude alone. Danger could come from any direction at any moment. Even worse, every new American tactic was met with a North Vietnamese counter. It became a deadly game of adaptation where one mistake could mean being shot down or captured. For the fighter jet crews of Vietnam, the skies had transformed into a brutal and unforgiving battleground. To fight this deadly air war, the U.S. relied on several remarkable aircraft, each with its own strengths and deadly vulnerabilities. The F-4 Phantom II quickly became the workhorse of the war, a two-seat, twin-engine jet flown by a pilot and a weapons systems officer. The Phantom could do it all: air-to-air combat, ground attacks, close support, even reconnaissance. With speeds topping Mach 2 and the ability to carry over 18,000 pounds of bombs and missiles, it was a fearsome weapon. But the Phantom wasn't perfect. It was large and less maneuverable than enemy MiG fighters. Worse, early models didn't have an internal gun. In the heat of a dogfight, when missiles failed, pilots often had no fallback. Another vital player, the F-105 Thunderchief, nicknamed the Thud. Built as a supersonic bomber, the Thud was fast and powerful, carrying up to 14,000 pounds of bombs deep into enemy territory. But it wasn't designed for air-to-air combat, and unlike the Phantom, it was a single-seat jet. That meant F-105 pilots flew alone into some of the most dangerous missions of the war. The Thud suffered heavy losses, particularly during the infamous Rolling Thunder bombing campaign. Alongside the Phantom and the Thud, several other jets played key roles in the air war. A-4 Skyhawk, a nimble, light-attack aircraft used heavily by the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. F-8 Crusader, known as the last gunfighter, famous for its agility and cannon armament. F-100 Super Sabre, the first U.S. fighter capable of supersonic speed in level flight, used primarily for ground attack and close air support. Each of these aircraft brought unique capabilities, but none were invulnerable. As North Vietnam's air defenses evolved, Flying any mission over enemy territory meant accepting staggering risks. By the mid-1960s, North Vietnam's skies had transformed into a fortress. With Soviet advisors and Chinese support, a powerful network of surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, radar-guided artillery, and MiG fighters took shape. These systems didn't just operate alone, they worked together. Every layer was designed to trap, confuse, and destroy American jets. Flying high to avoid flak, you'd get picked off by radar-guided SAMs. Fly low to dodge missiles, you'd fly straight into dense anti-aircraft artillery fire. And always lurking, MiG fighters, waiting to ambush damaged or distracted U.S. aircraft. Pilots soon realized there was no safe altitude, no safe route. Every mission became a white-knuckle ride through one of the deadliest air defense networks ever built. And the defenses kept getting better. Faster missiles, smarter tactics, more guns. For American fighter crews, the balance had shifted. What began as a war of dominance had turned into a daily battle for survival in the skies. Of all the threats American fighter crews faced, one weapon struck fear like no other: the SA-2 Guideline missile. A Soviet-made surface-to-air missile, SAM. The SA-2 was designed to hunt and kill high-speed jets. It was massive, 35 feet long, weighing over 5,000 pounds, and packed with a powerful fragmentation warhead. But its real killer feature? Speed. The SA-2 could reach Mach 3.5, nearly 2,600 miles per hour, giving pilots just seconds to react. And it didn't need a direct hit. When its warhead exploded, it blasted thousands of razor-sharp metal fragments into the air. A single burst could shred a jet even at long range. These missiles were fired from hidden mobile sites. Protected by anti-aircraft guns, they could be quickly moved, making them hard to find and harder to avoid. The first sign of danger was usually a warning tone in the cockpit: radar lock-on. If a missile was launched, the pilot had to react instantly, diving, banking, or rolling to break the missile's radar lock. But with speeds so high, even experienced pilots often had no chance. The SA-2 turned every mission into a deadly gamble, where one small mistake could mean fiery death or capture deep behind enemy lines. As the SA-2 threat grew, U.S. pilots needed new ways to survive. First, American jets were upgraded with radar warning receivers. These systems detected when enemy radar locked on, giving pilots a few critical seconds to react. Evasion became an art form. Sharp dives toward the ground, violent turns, or rolling maneuvers to break lock. But at Mach 3.5, outrunning an SA-2 wasn't easy. Many pilots simply couldn't escape, so the U.S. created a new, highly dangerous mission: Wild Weasel. Specially equipped jets, flown by elite crews, would intentionally fly into SAM-heavy zones, acting as bait. When an SA-2 radar turned on, they fired back with AGM-45 Shrike missiles, designed to home in on enemy radar and destroy it. It was deadly work. North Vietnamese forces quickly learned to fight back, using dummy radar sites and fake missile launches to lure Wild Weasels into traps. They even fired multiple missiles at once from different sites, overwhelming defenses and forcing American pilots to choose: evade or attack. For Wild Weasel crews, every mission was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, one where survival was never guaranteed. While SAMs grabbed headlines, the biggest threat to U.S. fighter crews wasn't always the missiles. It was the wall of anti-aircraft artillery, AAA, waiting just below. To dodge SA-2 missiles, American pilots were often forced to fly low, sometimes just a few hundred feet off the ground. That's exactly where North Vietnamese AAA gunners wanted them. The skies over key targets bristled with 37mm, 57mm, 85mm, and even 100mm cannons. These guns created thick clouds of flak, deadly metal fragments that could rip a jet apart. For many missions, the choice was grim: fly high and risk a missile, or fly low and risk a wall of flak that no pilot could outmaneuver. Some targets were so heavily defended that flying into them was almost suicidal, yet crews kept going, mission after mission. AAA inflicted more American losses than SAMs or MiGs combined. It was the constant, grinding danger, always waiting to punish even the smallest mistake. In the end, no matter how skilled the pilot, sometimes there was just too much flak to fly through. While American jets ruled the skies early in the war, North Vietnam's MiG fighters quickly turned the tables. With Soviet training and tactics, MiG-17s and MiG-21s became fierce predators. The MiG-17 was slower, but incredibly agile, with powerful autocannons perfect for close-in dogfights. The MiG-21 was a supersonic threat, armed with heat-seeking missiles and capable of quick, deadly strikes. But it wasn't just the planes, it was the tactics. North Vietnamese pilots used hit-and-run ambushes. They would hide near the edges of radar coverage, strike suddenly, and disappear before U.S. escorts could react. They also used bait tactics, luring American jets lower into zones thick with AAA and SAMs. Even with superior U.S. aircraft like the F-4 Phantom, these ambushes proved deadly. During Operation Rolling Thunder, MiG-17s famously shot down multiple F-105 Thunderchiefs, proving these older fighters could still kill. MiG pilots were experts at exploiting U.S. weaknesses. They attacked from unexpected angles, at vulnerable moments, turning every mission into a deadly chess match. For American crews, it meant constant vigilance, because one surprise strike was all it took. Flying a jet in Vietnam wasn't just a battle of machines, it was a test of mental endurance. Every mission came with crushing psychological weight. Pilots had to focus on their target, manage their aircraft, and work as a team, all while knowing that at any second, a missile launch warning, an incoming MiG, a wall of flak, could end their lives in a flash. There were no safe zones in the sky, no time to relax. They flew with constant tension, eyes scanning for radar locks, flak bursts, or enemy fighters. And behind it all, the chilling knowledge. Even if you survive being shot down, capture could mean torture or years in a prison camp. Many crews flew dozens, sometimes over 100 missions, under this relentless stress. It wore on them. Sleep was difficult, nerves were frayed. Some pilots described the tension as a grip of fear that never left them, even between missions. But still, they climbed back into their cockpits, again and again, knowing what awaited them in the skies above Vietnam. When a jet took critical damage, pilots had just seconds to decide. Fight to save the aircraft, or eject, and hope to survive. But ejection wasn't an easy escape. The force of being blasted out at hundreds of miles per hour often caused broken bones, burns, or concussions. Some airmen were knocked unconscious, waking up to find themselves parachuting straight into enemy territory. If possible, crews tried to fly as far as they could toward friendly lines or out over the sea where rescue was more likely. But deep inside North Vietnam, the jungle below offered no mercy. Fighter crews carried only a .38 revolver. A last resort weapon meant more for comfort than survival. Once a pilot was downed, enemy troops and local militias rushed to the crash site. In most cases, there was little chance to hide or escape. Rescue helicopters, brave crews flying into intense enemy fire, tried to pull pilots out. But these missions were often as dangerous as the original flight. In one case, during the rescue of Lieutenant and Colonel Hamilton, multiple aircraft were shot down, costing the lives of several rescuers. For many downed airmen, the worst was just beginning, because capture meant an ordeal few would ever forget. For a downed pilot in North Vietnam, every second counted. If friendly rescue teams could reach them in time, there was hope. But if the enemy found them first, the nightmare would begin. Once word of a crash spread, enemy soldiers, local militias, even civilians would swarm the area, hunting for the pilot. Captured airmen were often paraded through villages, beaten or publicly humiliated, used as propaganda tools against the U.S. war effort. In theory, North Vietnam had signed the Geneva Convention, protecting prisoners of war. But in reality, they labeled American airmen as terrorists, not soldiers, stripping them of those protections. Captured pilots faced brutal interrogations designed to break them, physically and mentally. Many airmen chose to stay with their doomed jets, refusing to eject, knowing that falling into enemy hands could lead to torture, forced confessions, or even death. Some rescue missions turned into all-out battles. Helicopter crews risked everything to save fellow airmen, flying straight into enemy fire, often with tragic results. For those captured, captivity stretched on, sometimes for years. And the conditions they endured were so horrific, they deserve an entire story of their own. But for now, one truth remains clear. Every mission over North Vietnam was flown with the full knowledge that capture could mean a fate worse than death. For those American pilots unlucky enough to be captured, survival became a new, brutal battle. North Vietnamese forces often treated downed airmen as trophies of war. Captured pilots were beaten, paraded through angry crowds, and held up for propaganda purposes. Images of defeated Americans broadcast to the world. Inside prison camps, conditions were inhuman. Many airmen were starved, isolated, and subjected to horrific interrogation techniques, designed to extract military secrets or force public confessions. The North Vietnamese dismissed international rules, claiming U.S. air crews were terrorists because of the devastating bombing campaigns. One of the most famous POWs was Navy pilot Everett Alvarez Jr., who endured 8.5 years of captivity, making him one of the longest-held American prisoners of the war. Others weren't so lucky. Many airmen never returned, dying from injuries, illness, or torture. Some of the 1,576 Americans still listed as missing in action from the war are believed to be aircrew lost deep behind enemy lines. For those who survived, the scars, physical and emotional, lasted a lifetime. Their ordeal remains one of the darkest chapters of the air war over Vietnam, and a story of incredible resilience and courage under unimaginable suffering. The fighter jet crews of the Vietnam War flew into some of the most dangerous skies in history. Every mission meant facing SAM missiles, MiG fighters, flak bursts, and the constant threat of being shot down. Many were killed. Many more were captured, enduring years of unimaginable suffering as prisoners of war. And yet, again and again, these pilots climbed into their cockpits, knowing full well what awaited them. Their courage, sacrifice, and resilience deserve to be remembered, not as a side note of the war, but as one of its most powerful stories. If you found this story as moving as we did, help us share it. And remember, we're aiming for 10,000 subscribers to bring you more hidden histories like this. So please, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching.